A drag strip somewhere in America. 1987. Two cars pull into the staging lanes. On the left, a Ferrari F40. 478 horsepower, twin-turbocharged V8. A machine that costs more than most Americans earn in a decade. The most celebrated performance car on Earth in the year it was born. On the right, a Buick Regal. No chrome, no badges, no name that anyone in those staging lanes would recognize as a threat. The kind of car your grandfather drove to church on Sunday and parked outside the country club on Wednesday. The Buick is all black. Everything on it is black. The paint, the trim, the wheels, the windows. No hood ornament, no chrome accents, and a power rating on its window sticker that the car itself seems to find personally offensive. The light goes green. The Buick wins by 0.3 of a second. The Ferrari F40, the most expensive, most powerful, most celebrated exotic car of its era, just lost a quarter-mile drag race to a Buick Regal. And General Motors, which built that Buick, spent every single day of that car's existence making absolutely sure the world never fully understood what it had created. If that sounds like a story worth hearing, subscribe and drop a comment, because this one goes deeper than most people know. To understand what the Grand National actually was, you need to understand what American performance looked like in 1980. The muscle car era was finished. Emissions regulations had reduced the engines that had defined an entire generation of American automotive identity to wheezing, gutted shadows of what they had once been. The 1980 Corvette produced 180 horsepower. The 1980 Camaro Z28 managed 190. The 1980 Mustang scraped together 131. These were not performance cars. They were performance car names bolted onto performance car bodies wrapped around engines that had been systematically hollowed out by the collision of federal emissions standards, insurance industry pressure, and the institutional conservatism of corporations that had stopped believing their own customers wanted speed. American performance was not merely diminished. It was widely assumed to be permanently, irreversibly dead. Into that landscape walked Buick, a brand synonymous with retirement age buyers, country club parking lots, and the particular kind of automotive respectability that implies you have never once in your life exceeded the speed limit. And Buick decided to do something that nobody in Detroit saw coming. They went racing. In 1981 and 1982, factory-backed Buick Regals won back-to-back NASCAR Winston Cup championships. Not trophy appearances, not marketing wins. Genuine competitive achievements that placed the Buick name alongside the most serious American motorsport of the era. Buick's management looked at those two championships and made a decision that ran directly against everything the brand's institutional identity had built. They would construct a street car that honored what the racing program had proven. The result was the 1982 Regal Grand National. The first year was restrained, 215 units, a turbocharged V6 producing 125 horsepower, more of an appearance package than a performance statement. Nobody was frightened, but the engineers kept working. By 1984, the Grand National had grown into something genuinely threatening. 200 horsepower, rear-wheel drive, peak torque, arriving at just 2,800 revolutions per minute. Hitting hard the instant boost came on. Period testing clocked it through the quarter mile in 15.9 seconds. That same year's Corvette ran 15.1. A Buick Regal was within 1 second of the Corvette in a straight line. Chevrolet's product planning office took notice. The same institutional machinery that had generated an internal memo about the Riviera GS eroding Corvette sales back in 1972 was now watching what Buick was quietly assembling in 1984. And only one side of that rivalry even knew it was happening. Between 1984 and 1987, Grand National performance improved with every model year, while General Motors' internal politics worked against it at every single step. Chevrolet's determination to preserve the Corvette's position as GM's sole legitimate performance flagship was the same institutional reflex that had killed the Riviera GS boat tail in 1973, buried DeLorean's Banshee in 1964, and budgeted the Firebird Type K out of existence in 1979. The mechanism changed each time. The reflex was always identical. For the Grand National, the mechanism was engine restriction. Buick wanted a V8. General Motors said no. The V8 was Chevrolet territory, specifically Corvette territory, and a Buick Regal running a V8 would have made the institutional politics completely unmanageable. So Buick worked with what it had, a 3.8-liter V6 that the corporation considered a second-tier engine for a second-tier division. What Buick's engineers understood, and what the General Motors Executive Committee apparently did not, was that a turbocharged V6 with the right calibration could produce performance numbers that made the displacement argument completely irrelevant. By 1986, the intercooled Grand National was running the quarter mile in 13.9 seconds at 98 miles per hour. The 1986 Corvette ran 14.2 seconds. A front-engine, rear-wheel drive Buick Regal with a 6-cylinder engine was now faster than America's dedicated sports car in a straight line. The Corvette division was not pleased, and Buick had not yet built the GNX. In 1987, the rear-wheel drive Regal platform was being retired. The next Regal would arrive on a front-wheel drive chassis carrying a naturally aspirated Chevrolet Vive 6, producing 125 horsepower. Buick's engineers knew this. They also knew that the G-body platform they were losing had never been fully pushed to the limits of what the turbocharged V6 was actually capable of delivering. They made a decision. If the Grand National was going to end, it was going to end with a statement that nobody at General Motors could ignore, and nobody in the automotive world could explain away. Because Buick's internal resources could not take the turbocharged V6 as far as the engineers intended. GM's institutional politics, ensuring that performance development resources flowed toward Chevrolet rather than Buick. They went outside the corporation entirely. They called ASC McLaren Performance Technologies, the same McLaren whose Formula One racing program had been winning championships since the 1960s. The same McLaren that would build its own supercars in the decade that followed. McLaren upgraded the Garrett turbocharger with a ceramic impeller, installed a larger intercooler, reprogrammed the engine management system, reinforced the rear axle housing, and added a longitudinal torque ladder bar that fundamentally transformed the car's ability to put power to the ground from a standing start. The result was the GNX, Grand National Experimental. 547 cars, one color, no chrome, no badges, and a power rating that was a deliberate, calculated lie. The GNX official factory power rating was 276 horsepower and 360 pound-feet of torque. Every journalist who drove one, every enthusiast who ran one at a drag strip, and every independent dyno operator who strapped one to their rollers knew that number was wrong. Third-party testing confirmed actual output at approximately 300 horsepower and 420 pound-feet of torque. A car producing 276 horsepower and weighing 3,500 pounds does not run the quarter mile in 13.43 seconds. The physics are straightforward. The drag strip results were public. Anyone willing to read the timing slips already knew exactly what Buick had actually built. The official rating existed for the press release. GM deliberately underrated the GNX to protect the Corvette. The same institutional reflex that had led Buick engineers to understate the 1970 GSX Stage 1 by a comparable margin a decade and a half earlier. The Corvette was GM's performance flagship. A Buick Regal with a window sticker claiming 300 horsepower would have made the Corvette's 240 horsepower an institutional embarrassment. So GM published 276 and hoped the drag strips would stay quiet. They did not. In 1987, the GNX ran a 12.7-second quarter mile. Faster than the Corvette. Faster than the Mustang GT. Faster than the Camaro IROC Z. Faster than the Porsche 911 Turbo. And 0.3 of a second faster than the Ferrari F40 in a period comparison test. The quickest production car in America in 1987 was a Buick. GM's own press release said it made 276 horsepower. 547 cars were built. Each one received a numbered production plaque mounted to the dashboard. A serial number acknowledging that what had been created was not a standard production vehicle, but something that required documentation of its own individual existence. The GNX retailed at $29,900 in 1987, nearly double the base Grand National's price and above the contemporary Corvette sticker. The car General Motors had officially rated below the Corvette. 2. Protect the Corvette's market position. Cost more than the Corvette when it left the dealership. Clean original examples sell today for $150,000 to $250,000. The Ferrari F40, it beat in period testing trades for approximately the same money. The Corvette that was supposed to be the faster car is worth a fraction of what the V6 Buick that actually was commands at auction. The GNX was not just fast, it was proof that the institutional argument General Motors had been making since 1964, that performance belonged exclusively to Chevrolet, that the Corvette's market position required protection from every division producing something threatening, that a Buick could not be permitted to embarrass a Corvette, was simply wrong. Buick had proven it with 6 cylinders, a turbocharger, and a McLaren phone number. Only because GM's own politics had refused to give them anything else to work with. Then GM moved on. In 1988, General Motors introduced the new Buick Regal. It arrived on a front-wheel drive platform. Under the hood sat a naturally aspirated Chevrolet 2.8-liter V6 producing 125 horsepower, not a turbocharged V6. Not a performance engine of any description. A 125 horsepower Chevrolet engine in a front-wheel drive Buick sedan. The car that had run a 12.7-second quarter mile and beaten a Ferrari F40 in a period comparison test was replaced by a car that needed over 9 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. No performance option was offered, no turbocharged variant was planned. The G-body platform that had produced the quickest American production car of the decade was retired and replaced by a corporate chassis that prioritized fuel economy, manufacturing cost, and the institutional logic that had governed every GM decision since Roger Smith's consolidation program began dismantling divisional engineering identity in the early 1980s. The GNX's numbered production plaque acknowledged its individual existence. The 1988 Regal acknowledged nothing that had come before it. GM had built the fastest car in America. Then it built the most forgettable replacement it could find. The GNX's legacy did not require GM's cooperation to survive. Kendrick Lamar named his 2024 album GNX and put the car on the cover. A cultural acknowledgement from one of the most recognized artists in the world that a 547-unit limited edition Buick from 1987 carries enough meaning to anchor a major artistic statement nearly 4 decades after it was built. The car, GM deliberately underrated, constructed through an outside contractor because internal politics prevented proper resource allocation, and replaced with a 125 horsepower sedan the following year, now sells for $250,000. The Corvette it was rated below to protect GM's institutional hierarchy sells for significantly less. The institution got what it wanted in 1987. The Corvette's market position was protected. The press release said 276 horsepower, and nobody in the executive committee had to explain why a Buick Regal was faster than America's dedicated sports car. What the institution did not get was the last word. The drag strips had the timing slips, the dynos had the real numbers, and Buick's engineers had the fastest car in America. GM just made sure the window sticker didn't say so. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments which suppressed engine, which underrated car, or which erased chapter of American automotive history you want uncovered next. Every single comment gets read, and you decide what comes next.